All right. Welcome back, Rebel HR community. We are so glad that you joined us. Super excited for the conversation today. With us, we have Professor Thomas Roulet. He is the Professor of Organizational Sociology and Leadership at Cambridge Judge Business School. He's a fellow at King's College as well. His research focuses on negative social evaluations, the future of work, and well-being. We're going to be talking about a lot of different aspects here. Really excited to have him with us as well. Welcome to the podcast, Thomas.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. This was one of those, like, I heard about you. I did a little bit of research, and I'm like, I got to see if this guy's available. And thankfully, you responded to a random cold email that you easily could have deleted. So thanks for taking some time to talk to me and to talk to our listeners here today.
My pleasure.
Well, we're gonna jump into it. One thing I did not mention here in the intro, you have a new book coming out. It's called Well-Being Intelligence. It's available now for pre-order where books are sold. It's going to be out here October 7th in the United States. It's already out here internationally. So maybe the first question that I'm curious to ask for people that are authors is what motivated you to write a book specifically focused on well-being intelligence?
That's a great question. Great starter. Well, I'm naturally interested in mental health in the workplace, and I think it's becoming a hotter and hotter topic due to the technological changes that we are experiencing, the pace of work. So a lot of people face mental health challenges at work. A lot of chief people officers, chief HR officers have to think about how they're going to deal with mental health issues at work. And I did research on the implication of hybrid working for mental health, the implications of mentoring for mental health. And one thing I was frustrated with that kind of got me to write this book. So I wrote this book with a counseling psychologist, Dr. Karen Batty, and together we wrote a book that we wanted to be the book to write a very practical book with tips, with ways to approach our own mental health and approaches that are anchored in ways that counseling psychologists approach those. So we have a huge literature about cognitive behavioral therapy, about how do we deal with anxiety, with stress, what does it mean practically, and that's what the book is about, is really to provide practical approaches to address our own mental health issues and to use that in organizations and when we manage others. And really the gap we believed was that there was no book really that provided practical insights. There were a lot of books about, yes, there are mental health issues at work, but nothing about what we should do about those mental health issues.
Well, I love that approach. And one of the challenges I think that I certainly face is, I went to school for business, right? And a lot of people in HR went that route. Many people in HR fell into it. They, maybe went to school to be an accountant, or they went to school specifically to do HR. But the reality is so much of our job is related to psychology or sociology. And where I think we get stuck is we're like expected to be these like pseudo therapists or pseudo psychologists or organizational experts as it relates to kind of the psychology of an organization and a culture. But we're kind of learning as we go, right? And I think that having practical tools grounded in science and research, are so incredibly important. And just from my standpoint, like they need to be understandable too, right? Like it can't be in like medical terminology because you're gonna lose me.
I think you're right, and we don't want chief people officers, chief HR officers to become psychological therapists, to become counselors. We just want them to understand what is causing stress and what is causing anxiety, and this self-awareness is something that they can use in the design of their organization and in the way they manage other people. That's really the root of the idea, and that's why we call this well-being intelligence. It's obviously, a reference to emotional intelligence, but it's the idea that it all starts with self-awareness. You don't need to be a therapist to think about mental health and to help other people with their mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fascinating to me if I go back and I think about so many of the situations that have required me to be involved in or my support. Many of them can be traced back to decisions that people made under duress that were not good, right? And it's not a leap of logic to assume that there's probably something related to mental health concerns or challenges or burnout or just workplace stress or a culture that facilitates a lack of mental health or mental wellness or well-being. And so as I hear this, to me it just rings incredibly true. One of the things that we're so focused on here at the podcast is kind of how we should be thinking about these things in the future and kind of the future of work. And I'm curious, as you were writing this book and through the course of your other research, are you seeing changes in mental health at work, and how are they presenting themselves that we need to be aware of in our seats in human resources?
Well, what really intrigued me to start, to work on mental health even more was the shift to hybrid working. And
Hmm.
so I worked together with Vitality, that's an insurer in the UK, and we ran that large study during COVID in 2020, where we looked at how remote and hybrid working was affecting mental health and productivity. And one of the core findings of that study, which was really one of the early study on the topic, was actually people, due to remote work, they struggle to disconnect.
Hmm.
And so we saw that people were sending each other text after hours, at a much higher rate. People were not taking days off. So there was an issue around that. And while there was a rise in productivity due to the shift to remote work, and you see that in a lot of national statistics, actually, we also saw that 6 months down the line, in the summer of 2020, we started seeing people burning out because they hadn't been able to disconnect. There was this blitzkrieg feeling that we were all going through.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Blitzkrieg feeling that we were all going through the motion of the COVID crisis and how it was affecting our business. So people were really, really well involved in the workplace. And we saw a lot of people who were very engaged who started burning out. And then mental health issues became, quite central.
Yeah. Yeah. It's to me, I mean, I can just reflect on that personally. And I remember those days where it's like you couldn't get away from it. Well, even turning on the news, it was like bad news, and it was the next variant to be terrified of, and then similar experience in our organization where you've got this kind of this continuous work requirement, and it's really never done, and it's impossible to shut it off when your desk is one room away, as opposed to kind of commuting into the office. So I think many organizations have kind of realized this. We're seeing now a little bit more of a trend of kind of leaders trying to pull people back into the office. Do you actually consider that to be maybe a net positive, even though it's been met with a little bit of frustration from people that like working remotely?
I think it's all about balance, and
Mm.
there was a lot of excitement with the hybrid work revolution because it provided people with flexibility. So now if you look at the data across the world in all locations, the number one request from applicants is that they want to be able to work flexibly. So if you don't offer flexible work to your workforce, you're going to be struggling to recruit talent. So that's now a fixture of of organizations. So we cannot go back to where we were before. We cannot go back to everybody in the
Hmm.
office 5 days a week. That's
Yeah.
not going to work. But probably there needs to be some kind of balance And we need to acknowledge that working remotely doesn't mean working anytime and all the time. And so if people can have, healthy boundaries, spend some time in the office where they're going to build a network, they're going to build social connections that will help them process what is going through, what is happening at work. It's always good to rant a little bit about your boss at the coffee machine.
Yeah.
We laugh, but actually,
Yeah.
this is a massive thing. It's
Yeah.
you cannot do that on a Teams meeting. You actually need to do that in person. And talking about your experience and your struggles and your challenges at work is what get people to release the steam, so that they don't suffer from mental health issues. They don't get stressed. They don't get anxious because they had a bad meeting, a bad interaction with a colleague.
It's fascinating. Um, okay. So maybe a question around that. So is it healthy? Is it healthier to have those types of interactions in person to like this almost like this like venting or this release of concern face to face, like you just described at the water cooler or over coffee?
Yeah, absolutely. So this goes back to a study I worked on with the police 10 years ago, where I looked at mentoring and mental health. And what we observed in that study is that the senior policeman and policewoman, by having a mentee, they could normalize their experience, and actually they could lower their mental health challenges because they could normalize struggles and difficult experiences in the workplace, and that it would go both ways. Both mentees and mentors will be able to share in person their sources of stress, their sources of anxiety, and you can imagine there are lots of sources of anxiety in a stressful occupation like this one. And doing it in person was, a massive game changer. And why is this better in person than on a Zoom call or on Teams? Is because there are a lot of informal cues that we exchange when we meet and when we talk in person that are hard to pick up on an online meeting. So if you use irony, if I always, I'm French, so I can be, quite sarcastic, and sometimes when I make jokes on a Zoom call, they don't go so well because people don't realize they are jokes. But if they were seeing me in person, they would realize that those, are not serious points I'm making. So I think we do need those face-to-face interactions to build trust, to read those informal cues, and to be able to be able to rely on psychological safety. And psychological safety is harder to develop if you are only on Zoom and Teams call, and you need to plan a call on Teams to be able to share your worries with someone else.
Yeah.
While actually, you don't need to plan to meet people at the water cooler or the coffee break.
Absolutely. Oh, it's such a powerful concept. And one of the things that I've struggled with in my organization, as well as I've heard other HR professionals struggle with, is this element of psychological safety. And I think all the research and just intuitively, it makes sense. Like, you need that to be a high functioning organization, right? You have to have that to have trust and to achieve your goals collectively. But the context that I haven't really thought about that I think is a really important concept is the fact that, fostering these in-person connections, these accidental meetings, these vent sessions that they don't necessarily sound productive, right? They, like, on the surface, it's like somebody griping about their boss at a water cooler. Well, that sounds not great. But the reality is, if it allows for this type of an environment where there is psychological safety, it actually is not only productive, but essential.
Yeah, what is the power of psychological therapy? Is your ability to put your concerns out there, to share them, and to have someone reflect on them. And that's what we do on a daily basis when we chat with colleagues and we chat
Mm,
about the challenges that we experience at work.
mm.
So, yes, they sound like a loss of time, a waste of time to chat with colleagues, to gossip with colleagues, but actually there is a value in that.
Wow. So I mean, this is really fascinating. And I think, one comment that I'd make, and maybe I would encourage our listeners to reflect on. So, I have a really unique situation at work where I get a lot of face time with our CEO and with our C-suite executives and senior leaders. And I see them in situations and scenarios where they are venting about things or questioning things, or I get to see their humanity a little bit, right? And that gives me the kind of the ability to
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
right? And that gives me the kind of the ability to contextualize the decisions that are being made, believe in the direction we're going, like have trust in where we're going, and voice my concerns if I feel like maybe we should be thinking about something different, or I don't feel like this is the right direction, or hey, so and so is really upset about this. Maybe we should think about responding to that. But not every employee gets that, right? And for those that don't get that, like how do we allow them, that type of space or that type of trust or that type of belief? And so it's, for me, it's a little bit self-reflective, like, well, I'm forgetting about the employee experience broadly, and I'm using my own kind of point of reference, which is not most people's experience at my company. So how do I facilitate that? Really, really, really fascinating concept. I'm curious, the other thing we touched on hybrid work. I'm curious on your perspective on technology in the workplace. And I think there's all these headlines, there's all this noise around AI is going to replace jobs. Technology is going to render face-to-face interactions worthless. There's concerns that people are going to just become kind of numbers or cogs in this massive machine because technology is going to take over, our world. What's your perspective on how we should be thinking about some of these technological advancements in the context of employee well-being and in the workplace?
I'm glad you're asking that question. I think it's a forgotten question. And we know that AI is increasing workers' productivity. We know that if you're not implementing AI in your organization right now, you are making a mistake, and you're going to go into the wall. So we need AI, and we need all firms to embrace AI. But the problem is that we are not really thinking about the implications it has for organizational culture and for social connections at work. And it's a little bit what happened with hybrid work, which is repeating itself with AI. And now we're starting to get research insights on the implications of AI for well-being. And so, for example, there was a study that came out last year. That's not my study, but studies that was conducted by colleagues, where they found that the more you engage with AI in the workplace, the more socially disconnected you are, and that causes people to have a rise in insomnia and alcohol consumption, which are markers of mental health challenges, obviously. And what is the mechanism here? Think about it. When you go to work, you sit at your desk and you ask a question to a generative AI application, whether it's ChatGPT or anything else, instead of asking the person sitting next to you. If you ask the person next to you, obviously they might give you an answer, so you get the benefits of the answer, but they also get the benefits of answering you, and you have built a connection. And so that social connection might not happen if you send your request on ChatGPT. And we see that with onboarding. So, for example, I went and visited a very large international bank recently, and they are obsessed with employee engagement and how we have employee touch points that are seamless. In particular, how do we use AI for onboarding? So all those firms, they have those AI systems for onboarding where people can just ask any questions when they start their job. And it sounds great on paper, but the reality is that it means that they are not going to build their social network because they're going to ask this AI engine all the questions they need about the firm that they have just joined. While they could actually have had many conversations that would have helped them build the network, build the social connections, embed them in the culture of the organization. So I think we are forgetting about the lost social connections that AI will cause. And yes, it is a great repository of knowledge, uh, but also humans and people are not only repository of knowledge, they are, potential for social connections, for social embeddedness that can really support well-being at work.
Yeah. Oh, that rings true. It's funny. I was just having this conversation a few weeks ago with my wife, and I got home and I was working on a something that I was working with generative AI on an HR tool that I'm like trying to like build and deploy within my organization to help us make good decisions. And I was just off, like it was just one of those like just kind of growly and on edge, and she looked at me and she's like, you need to get out, you need to talk to people, and you need to get sunlight. Like, you've been stuck on this computer like building this thing, and you're just like, you're kind of a jerk right now. She said it much nicer than that, but it was a little bit eye-opening. It's like, well, wow, if my partner's seeing these mannerisms, I can guarantee you my team is, and my organization is, and the truth is that I'm a bellwether for the kind of the attitude of the people around me, just by nature of my job title and my job function. And so it was a little bit startling and eye-opening that this probably isn't great for me to spend a significant amount of time just talking back and forth with an AI agent, right?
Yeah, and you might really, you might get a lot of blind spots. Yes, AI is great, but the knowledge and insight you will get from people is what will help you get this tool to be actually human, to actually be agreeable to people, be useful to people,
Yeah.
and all of those answers you can only get them by asking people. and
Yeah.
and it's tempting, those tools are so incredible. It's tempting to rely on them solely, but they're only useful as a complement to other sources of knowledge, other sources of interaction.
I love that. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I remember I go back to in kind of my early career, and when I was learning to be a leader, and I distinctly remember like I would, and I'm sure you could probably cite the studies, but there's all this research that like if you learn something, if you go through a course and you learn it, then you'll retain a little bit of it. If you apply it, you'll retain significantly more. And then if you teach it, it's like locked in there forever, right? So there's also this organizational like learning journey that needs to occur through social connectivity. Like it actually it's and certainly when you're doing like technical work, or you're working with customer interactions, like having that mentor mentee relationship is so incredibly critical for the broad organization to continue to learn, grow, develop.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
For the broad organization to continue to learn, grow, develop.
Yeah, and what you're saying is really at the core of the concept of well-being intelligence we talked about. If you can understand what is causing you stress and anxiety, you can understand what is causing stress and anxiety to the people in your team. And you
Yeah.
can change the organization because you are a manager, you are high up. You can then understand what to change. So, we talked beforehand about, the importance of holidays. So if you role model taking holidays and disconnecting, because you know that you have a lot more energy when you come back from a holiday where you have disconnected. By the way, there is research showing that this is truly the case. Then you can ask your people to do the same. And it works for you. Yes, it might work slightly differently for other people, but it's very likely that it will bring the same sort of benefits to others.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I am horrible at that. like admittedly, like, I have workaholic tendencies. There's a reason that there's a reason that I do a podcast on the nature of work. I'm sure some of it's just to try to figure out my own, mental needs. What advice do you have for us that maybe like we understand the importance of this? We we're interested to learn, but we're really bad at applying these on a daily basis and modeling the behavior that we know would be beneficial for us and for the organization. How do we get out of this rut?
Yeah, I have the same issue. I have the same issue. I'm very bad at disconnecting. Um, the only way to see the benefits of something is to go for it yourself, and that's again something that is at the core of cognitive behavioral therapy. The only way to address a challenge is to face it. And so that's the same with the benefits of holidays, the benefits of proper break. You really need to do the experiment, and I did this last summer, and it was life changing, where for the first time I just removed Outlook from my phone. I was very clear that I would not take any text. I removed WhatsApp, and I completely disconnected for 3 weeks in a row. And try it for yourself. I know this sounds crazy from the others. I know that in the US, you take
the US, that's like you might as well be dead to everybody. After 3 weeks, everybody just assumes you passed away.
Yes, for a French person, 3 weeks is the minimum. The minimum. But the power of disconnection is that when you come back, you have all this energy, and not only the energy to be productive, but also a lot of creative energy. And I have read the research. The research is very compelling on this topic. We have had research for the last 30 years on the impact of holidays, that the impact of disconnection, and how people really gain energy when they come back, and that they gain a lot more energy than what they expect. So I think we have to force ourselves sometimes to apply those principles, and it can be hard, and we can be reluctant, and sometimes we need a push. So if you were talking about your wife, partners are usually very good at pushing you to do those things. Partners, colleagues. So I do that with my colleagues, and I think that's an important thing. You need to not only push it on yourself, you need to push it on yourself, see the results, and then try to push it on others when it's beneficial.
So I think one of the things you mentioned this earlier, and I wrote it down in my notes, and I think the older I get, the more I do this work, the more I realize that language is so important. And one of the key words and some of the key language that you learn in therapy is boundary, right? You learn about boundary, and for me, my issue was getting over being a people pleaser, and there's all these reasons why I am, and why I've got to continually focus on that. But boundaries is something I've always struggled with, and we're talking about that in the context of the workplace now, right? And so it's, for me, it's a really really key tie-in that this work is not isolated work, right? Like it's all mental health, whether it's on a personal basis, learning how to set boundaries, or organizationally learning how to structure a culture that allows for boundaries to be set. It's kind of all it's all critical work that's really focused on making sure that you're creating a great environment. Fascinating. So maybe the last question I have here, and then we'll jump into the flash round. For those of us that really see this as a gap, as a need, as an area that needs to be focused on, what would be your piece of advice on where we should start? Like what's the one thing that we should really just be focusing on for people that are maybe just trying to figure out how do I start going down this path and helping my workplace have better well-being intelligence?
I think the key of our book is starting with the self. We experience a lot of stress in the workplace, but we don't take a lot of time to reflect on it. We just, experience it. So it can be as simple as, I'm stressed about giving this presentation. I'm stressed, and you'll be stressed until you have delivered the presentation, and then you'll forget about it. And what we try to invite people to do is to be reflective about that. Is what is causing that stress? And usually there is some kind of reinforcing cycle. So you are stressed because you think that you're gonna fail. You think that you're gonna be made fun of. You think you're gonna be, you're not gonna be able to present your slides. That someone is gonna ask a very tricky question, or you have, your worst enemy in the room, and you're afraid they're gonna crush you. So if you think about those sort of fears, those sort of source of stress, usually they are overblown. And by thinking about stress or being stressed is something that is self-reinforcing. Same with anxiety. And so if we take a step back, try to think about objectively how things will go and remind ourselves about times it has gone perfectly. And then we face that challenge upfront in terms of trying to avoid it. So, not going to present anything and avoiding presentation because you are stressed about presentation. Then we can really relativize and realize that objectively there was not as much sources of fear, not as much anxiety that we should have had about this situation. And so that's a self-reflective exercise. And just this kind of self-reflective
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
exercise. And just this kind of self-reflective approach can really help us think about the root cause of such stress. And it can be about the culture. Maybe you have a culture in which people ask tough questions in meetings. And so people are stressed about meetings and presentations because of that. Mm-hmm. And so that's how you get from your experience to organizational culture, to organizational strategies, and to better understand what is it that needs to be changed at the team level, at the organizational level, so that people don't experience the same mental health issues as you did, and you can really push for change.
Right. Absolutely. Really powerful. We'll leave it there. I think, really important, especially for HR, as we are we're the culture champions. We're the ones that help facilitate this. And if we can't do this for ourselves and be self-reflective, then who's going to do it?
And maybe if you let me just add one thing about organizations and chief HR officers. A lot of firms, they only think about addressing mental health issues once they have happened. Once
right.
they happen out. But actually, there is a lot they can do upstream. With culture, with awareness, with detection, that will prevent issues from becoming critical. And that's I think, a really important HR implications.
I think some of the best HR professionals that I've worked with have an intuitive understanding of that fact. And they spot these challenges before they become issues. And it's difficult to teach that. I think some people have kind of an intuitive understanding of how to do that. They're naturally highly empathetic and just kind of concerned about these things. So for those of us that maybe struggle with that, again, self-reflection, awareness, understanding how to put language to the behaviors that we're observing in your teams, really, really critical. The book, again, Wellbeing Intelligence, available for pre-order now, where books are sold here in the U.S., October 7th. We are going to shift gears. We're going to go to the just a couple questions in the flash round. So, Thomas, are you ready?
I'm ready. Go for it.
Here we go. All right. Where does HR need to rebel?
Where does HR need to rebel? I think we need to stop thinking of HR as just, a cog in the machine. And when you interact with your CEO, with your strategy people, they think that they can impose any kind of strategy to the organization without thinking about the HR implication. So for me, one thing that is key with all the chief HR officers that I interact with is I tell them, be sure that you have a seat at the strategy table, so that you are involved in strategy making. And today we cannot do strategy without HR because we need the right talent, because we need the right learning and development. We cannot afford anymore to leave HR out of strategy.
I'm gonna break my own rules and kind of go off the flash round thing, but I'm gonna tell you a story or some advice I got from a very experienced CHRO a number of years ago. I was just pretty new in the role, and I was really struggling to connect and get that seat at the table with my senior leadership team. And I was complaining to her about, I was whining. And she looked at me and she said, well, maybe the reason that they're not letting you do the work that you want to do is because you haven't done that work for them yet personally. So maybe you should ask them how you can help them personally. And actually, and I took that advice, and what, it was funny. It was like, I wasn't trying to pitch a big strategic deck. I wasn't trying to be everything to everyone. I was just trying to help that individual that I was struggling to make a connection with their own personal, in this case, leadership challenges. And guess what happened then? Then they started inviting me to more meetings and trusting me because I was just helping them on a personal level in order to connect. And it take it from an experienced CHRO that knew that I just needed to get out of my own way and just be helpful. But it goes back to what we just talked about. It was self-reflection, and then it was helping somebody else reflect on their own individual work. And that helped earn that seat. All right, last question for you. Who should we be listening to about this topic? Who else should we be kind of aware of or reading or any other research you would point us to?
So I think on AI, the research I was citing about mental health and AI is coming from a colleague who is at Northeastern, who is the Dean of Northeastern Business School, David De Kremer. So he has a really interesting book on AI, that AI and leadership that I think came out last year. Who else? Well, one thing that I find really important for chief HR officer in the current context is the issue of job design, because we need to rethink job design on an almost permanent basis. And I have a colleague in Quarter published last year a really good book on job crafting and job design. His name is Ben Laker. He's also based in the UK. I mean, I have a lot of recommendations. You're not going to stop me now. I'm done. On boundaries, one piece of work that I love is by another colleague called Greg McKeown. I don't know if you know his book. He has, published a couple of books, and his last book is really about this. It's about your ability. It's called essentialism. It's your ability to focus yourself on what really matters, and that means creating boundaries.
Yes. We actually have an outreach. If you can make a comment, I've got an outreach to get him on the podcast because I'm aware of the Essentialism book. So if you can put a good word in.
I will. I'm sure he will be interested in talking about his next big idea.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Thomas, thank you for the time. I know you're incredibly busy and with a 4-month-old, incredibly sleepy. So thank you for spending some time with us here today. Really, really powerful work. I want to thank you for putting the time and energy into helping us understand this and for putting the book out there. So if you are interested in getting your hands on the book, we'll have a link here in the show notes. Hop in there, click in, get the book, Wellbeing Intelligence. Thomas, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Kyle.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai